I'm a merchant mariner, with a couple summers of sea time under my belt. I've seen some weird stuff in the Atlantic, Mediterranean, and Arctic Ocean. If anyone has any questions about ocean myths and cryptids, I'd love to give my answer. I also dive and have a degree in marine environmental science, and I've seen odd stuff while diving too. Also inviting any other sailors or divers to share stories as well.
Have you or your associates had any encounters with phantom divers?
Yes, actually. But this story happened to my uncle, who isn't a sailor, just a diver. He was diving the Atoka shipwreck, a very cool dive that I'd love to do. The Atoka isn't supposed to be haunted. However, the son of the treasure hunter, Mel Fisher, who was looking for it, died at sea. I have a good source that Mel's son was super drunk when the boat sank, which led to his death. Also, Mel had some weird knowledge about the ship. He swore that there was lots of emeralds on the Atocha when it sunk, but there was never any record of that being the case. But when they found the shipwreck, emeralds everywhere. So my uncle was diving with a stranger as his buddy and swam down to try and find some treasure, which supposedly is still pretty common on that wreck. After about 5 minutes, he buddied back up with his partner. For whatever reason, this stranger assigned to him by the charter was heading way out past the wreck. My uncle didn't want to leave his partner alone, so he kept going out, trying to pull this guy back in. The guy wouldn't listen and kept motioning for my uncle to follow him farther out. Eventually, he turned around and realized the boat was nearly out of sight, so he swam back. Waiting for him, there was his diving buddy. The guy had lost track of my uncle when he went to look for treasure. He ended up just partnering up with another group. At the end of the dive, everyone was accounted for on the boat. Nobody admitted to leading my uncle so far away from the shipwreck, and everyone else was with their buddies the whole time. If that doesn't qualify as a phantom diver, I don't know what does. Again, this story comes from our intrepid treasure hunter. I'm going to call him Carl from now on, just to make writing these a bit easier on myself. Carl was a week into his 2-week treasure hunting voyage/vacation. So far, he'd had little success, and today wasn't any better. It was getting near lunch, and so far all he'd done is sit around drinking beer and watching his sonar. Finally, he spots something that piques his interest. A long, pole-shaped object jutting out of the ocean floor and propped against some sort of large rock outcrop. More often than not, Carl says that stuff like this on sonar ends up being just an old waterlogged tree that sunk to the bottom. But there's always the chance that it's the mast of a long-sunk ship that was shattered by undersea currents, its treasures and artifacts spread along the sea floor. Hoping for a much-needed win, Carl prepped his gear and dived. The descent was uneventful, visibility good, and he was able to spot the wreck from a good distance away. He became more and more convinced that it was a wreck the closer he got, and his excitement grew. Finally reaching the spot, he discovered that the beam was in fact jutting out of the rock rather than leaning against it. The rock was weathered and covered in dead coral and barnacles along with the mast, but the shape was distinctly similar to the hull of a large ship. An intact hull means intact treasure, and Carl eagerly began to search for an entry point so he could investigate the interior. After a few minutes of searching, he couldn't find a single hole or break in the coral-encrusted exterior of the wreck, which is a bit odd given that the ship had sank. Carl almost gave up hope until he came across something extremely strange. There was a door, perfectly preserved, sitting embedded in the side of the hull. Carl's first instinct was to open it, but out of nowhere, every single one of his instincts started screaming alarm bells at him. He hadn't seen a single fish or sign of life on or near the wreck. The wreck was old, too old for there to be a perfectly preserved modern door complete with unrusted brass handle in the side of the hull. He pulled back and took another closer look at the wreck as a heavy sense of dread began to overtake him. He found a patch of the mast where the coral crust had fallen away and revealed the true surface. After knocking on it a few times, Carl realized that the mast wasn't made out of wood, it was stone. If the entire wreck was petrified, it was very, very old. Much too old to make any sense. And much, much too old for there to be a completely preserved modern door in the side of the hull. Who the hell puts a door in the side of their ship's hull anyway? The sense of dread Carl was fearing became overpowering. Every single one of his senses was screaming at him that he shouldn't be here, that he didn't belong, that something was very, very wrong. But there was no way he would just come all the way out here, make the discovery of a lifetime, and just leave. So he swallowed his fear and headed back towards the door. He wasn't going to let nerves take what was possibly one of the greatest archaeological discoveries of the century away from him. As he swam around the hull to the section containing the door, the fear intensified until, as he described, it felt like I was having a complete mental breakdown. Still, though, he pushed through his fear and towards the door. As it came into sight, he noticed something was wrong. The door was ajar and slowly opening from the inside. Carl sat there for what must have been a few full seconds, watching the door open, his entire body screaming at him to run. That was when he felt something else. Something watching him from inside the door. Something that Carl could only describe as pure, unthinkable evil. Carl made a mad dash for the surface, hyperventilating and screaming into his mask, not daring to look back as he could feel a presence following behind him, watching with hungry eyes. He shot straight to the surface without any safety stops, flopped onto his boat, headed it back towards land at full speed, and managed to call the Coast Guard for help, despite being racked with pain from decompression sickness. He was picked up off his ship in a helicopter and flown to the nearest decompression chamber. Thanks to the quick rescue, Carl survived, albeit with permanent joint damage and some paralysis in his left leg that put an end to his treasure hunting career. He refused to share the location of the wreck with me. Some things on the bottom of the ocean aren't meant to be found.
I'm a scuba diver, took the course and everything when I was 14. B16, old enough to borrow a spear gun from the local dive shop. Go diving with some older folks at night. See a good-sized fish. Aim, fire, and miss the vitals. Fish is hit, a spear lodged in its back and swimming out to open ocean. Lose track of it 10 feet out. The line attached to the spear suddenly goes slack. Reel it back, feel something heavy for a second, and then it's gone. Only half a fish left. Show rest of the dive group, dive master visibly turns white. Rapidly ascend and get back onto the boat. As we take off the dive gear, feel something bump the boat. I shine the light into the water. Some sort of giant blob is cuddling our yacht. Panic and fire my spear gun at it. It connects. Blob flees, spear gun flies out of my hand. Spear gun is still attached to me via a rope. Fly off the boat. Get dragged out 200 yards in 10 seconds. This is how I die. .avy. Fumble for dive knife, cut rope. Swim the 200 yards back to the boat in what felt like 10 seconds. Days later, at the dry dock. So, Smith, about that blob thing. What about it? He shows me the side of the boat where the blob bumped the boat. It looks like a bear mauled it. The scary thing was that all happened in 15-meter deep water for the most part. The ledge where the ocean floor disappears sinks off into 60 to 90 meters or so. Something, also known as the blob, is getting very close to shallow waters, and as far as I can tell, none of the local science people or scuba divers can tell me what the blob is. The only thing that gets that large and visit those waters is a bull shark, but the marks on the boat were very much not made by a shark.
So a bit of backstory first. I'm a dive master, been diving almost my entire life, done deep sea welds, rescue and recovery. I've seen enough bloated corpses to fill a school bus over the course of my career. There's only one thing I've ever seen that's inexplicable, only one thing that's truly scared me. I'm a pretty hardened guy. It's something I've had to become due to the nature of my job. You can't afford to start panicking when you're 800 feet underwater. Why? Well, there's a number of reasons, but mostly, it can literally kill you. If you try to panic swim to the surface without safety stops to let your body decompress, you will die from decompression sickness. So at all times, you must stay calm while diving. Even if you found the bloated body of a small child with her eyes gone and can barely breathe because the urge to simultaneously retch and cry is so strong you can hardly function. I guess this is reading more like a description of diving as a profession, but I need to add one more technical detail for you to fully understand the context. When you dive deep, there's another major risk you run: narcosis. Essentially, the pressure becomes so extreme that the gases you're breathing in change their properties and have an effect on your brain, similar to narcotic drugs. The symptoms increase as you go deeper. They include sleepiness, confusion, hallucinations, dizziness, hysteria, nausea, loss of memory, euphoria, and eventually, death. There is also a risk of oxygen toxicity, where oxygen literally becomes toxic to your body, causing seizures and possibly death. I hope I don't need to explain why seizures while diving is a poor combination. With that out of the way, I can get to my story. I was doing a recovery dive in a local lake for the police, some idiot kid who hadn't worn his life jacket while drinking on a party boat. It was deep enough to require mixed gas to avoid narcosis. I was following all the normal protocols, keeping in contact with my diving partner, watching my dive computer. It doesn't take long to get to the bottom. Getting back up always takes much longer. Me and my partner split up to cover more ground because visibility was extremely low. It must have been about 5 minutes before I saw it. There was a human silhouette standing upright at the bottom of the lake. I swam closer and found a man, perfectly preserved without a sign of decay on his body. He was buried in silt up to his shins. It really looked like he could still be alive, or had only been dropped into the water a few moments ago. I tied a line to him and started to head back up to the surface so I could get the boat team to haul up the body. So I swim up, letting the line play out behind me until I reach my first safety stop. While I'm waiting for my body to decompress so I can head further up, I notice that the spool of line is still being pulled out, even though I've stopped. It's completely taut and rolling out straight down at a blistering speed. It takes me about half a second to realize that my reel is about to run out and I'm about to be sucked down by the line. There's a good 900 plus feet on my line, and the speed it was being reeled out was so tremendous that as soon as I tried to grab it, my hand was split almost completely open to the bone. In retrospect, that was a dumb thing to do, but it was just basic instinct to grab the rope and try to cut it with my knife. I get a sudden IQ boost and instead cut the straps holding the reel to my suit a few seconds before the line runs out and it vanishes into the murky water within about half a second. I feel as if the force of the whiplash alone would have been strong enough to break my back and kill me if I hadn't cut the straps. I am pretty shaken at this point, more shaken than I've been since I found my first dead kid. But still, I managed to ascend slowly and take my safety spots despite the pain, fear, and of course all the blood leaking out of my hand. Good thing this was a fresh water dive, or I might have been in real trouble on my way up. Anyway, my knee-jerk reaction and what everyone else told me was that it was narcosis-fueled hallucinations. Divers see all sorts of shit when narcosis kicks in. I've heard stories of fish and squid with human faces. Some guy swears he was face-to-face with Cthulhu. My point is, narcosis is to an extent like temporarily being on DMT, and it can make you see some absolutely crazy shit. The thing I can't make sense of is how I got the cut on my hand. It's clearly from a rope. It's not clean enough to be from my knife or any other sharp object. The doctor even noted that I had friction burns all surrounding the cut. So what the fuck caused the cut if I was hallucinating? And if I wasn't hallucinating, what the fuck could drag out a line that fast? What really keeps me up at night is that the guy was resting on the bottom of the lake and my line was going straight down. So either he was pulled through the bottom of the lake or something with incredible strength and speed grabbed my rope and was reeling me in like a fish. I'm not sure which is worse,